We can do it. Yes, we can. We can change things throughout the land. But we all must lend a hand. We can do it. Oh, yes, we can. Oh, your neighbor over there, a bit bewildered, but he cares.
Welcome to Changing Our World. I'm Linda Weltner, your host, and we're going to be talking about Arabs and Israelis and Israeli Palestinians at a very important point, because this program called Artsbridge, which brings together different religions and different people from the Middle East, was going on at the time that bullets were shooting everywhere and bombs, and Gaza was under attack and the Israelis were under attack. And Debbie Nathan and Evan Longin brought a group of 24 students, late teenagers, to Williamstown and tried to get Israelis, Jews, Palestinians, kids from the West Bank, Christians, Americans, Black students, an Asian girl, to become kindred spirits. That is not an easy task, and we're going to explore how it happened. So, Evan, why don't you talk about the technique by which you get these kids to understand one another and feel compassion for one another?
First of all, we have been working now for 8 years?
8 years.
8 years on this project, and it has been evolving. But two of the ideas that stand out most prominently is the use of art and the use of dialogue. And through art and dialogue, through working on projects together as teams, and through learning how to be part of a collaborative dialogue, we have brought children together in a way that allows them to start to understand each other better.
Now, you're a psychologist, you practice in Marblehead, and what the heck is a collaborative dialogue?
Again, there are certain aspects to it that we emphasize. One of the aspects is how to listen. It's very important to us. We teach children to be in a listening position. So when someone is interviewing another person, there's a group of people that we call witnesses who listen to the dialogue and don't immediately respond. In our culture, we're used to immediately taking a stance as somebody's speaking. What we want them to do is start to take in and understand the nature of the conversation they're listening to. So we promote listening skills, we promote curiosity.
So one person would be speaking and a lot of people would be listening?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then they get a chance to reflect, to share not their reactions necessarily, but what they heard. And so what they start, I believe, to understand is there's a commonality between them, that things that they did not expect people who were, quote, their adversaries, right, to express are the same feelings, the same hopes, the same aspirations, the same concerns, the same hurts as they do.
So if an Israeli kid says, I grew up as a youngster having to run into a bomb shelter and I had nightmares and everything, then the kids who are listening get a chance to say, that happened to me too?
They get a chance to say, I understand what it's like to be frightened. I understand what trauma is like in my life, as well as in theirs. I'll let Debbie do more talk about that, but she works with the kids directly. But what we try to promote is the concept of empathy, of internalizing the experience of the other, not to see the people as unlike me, but like me.
How important do you think this is to the program?
I think it's core. to the program, that people learn to listen, they learn to, we use the word collaborate, but collaborate can be a very bad word in the Middle East. But we use the word, they learn to work together, to be a team, to understand each other.
And each of the observers knows that they will get a chance.
Yes.
So they don't have to get their 2 cents edgewise about themselves, because they will be the one who will get a chance to reveal
Yes, and to express.
the depth of the
and then
suffering.
also, and I don't want to leave out the art, because the art is so essential, that they have a chance to work with each other as a team, Arab and Israeli, American, working together to formulate a statement together that's a core concern to all three of them.
I went to Williamstown and I actually saw the art that was done there at such a depth that it was stunning, stunning. I have seen things at Peabody Essex Museum that I thought were very nice, but these moved me to the core. I could not believe that teenagers could reach this depth, and you'll get to see those in the and I'll talk a little bit about them too. My daughter was at Babson, and they got a group of Israeli and Arab kids together, thinking that a plot to make money would knit them together, and so they had Arab-Israeli teams, Arab-Jewish teams, working on a money-making profit thing that they were supposed to continue when they got home. It completely fell apart. Not a single one of the programs got followed through, because they had not learned to, well, your kids learned to love each other, but these kids had not even had the opportunity
Again,
to
unfortunately,
like each other.
I think the project that they did at Babson, which you familiarized me with, was missing the component of dialogue.
Yeah.
That they were not trained in the mechanisms that enable people to talk and listen. The skills of learning to put yourself in the position of the other. And that's what that program was missing, and that's what most programs of this sort are missing. That's why Debbie's program is so unusual.
Let me tell you one of the artworks. There are these two figures standing on a flat surface that is colored, 4 different colored. One was for anger, another one was loving, another one was environmental, and so it was a very emotional basis. And they were lit up from the inside. The girls were raving about how whatever supplies they need, they get. And their hands were touching. And written on the bodies of these small figures and around were snatches of the dialogue. And what essentially, the hair is rising in the back of my head. The point was that they could connect and light up for each other because of these shared experiences and the empathy that came across. I thought it was just a beautiful statement about what they saw in the program. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how do you get them to conceptualize this art project?
It's a process. And the students start off coming up with ideas, and generally the ideas are fairly basic. But what happens is, over the 3 weeks, they go through the dialogue process, they get to know each other, they develop their ideas.
Do they pick their teams, or they're assigned?
No, they're assigned.
Okay.
And so they don't know each other, they may not like each other, but they're assigned these teams, and they have to work together.
Yeah.
And so throughout the 3 weeks, they have to decide what they're going to create and how they're going to create it and how they're going to execute it. So there's a lot of decision making that has to happen. And this happens in the same way that the dialogue happens, during the same time. So they have art, they have dialogue in the morning, and they have art in the afternoon. So they go from the dialogue to lunch to an activity to art. And
do they discuss their ideas for the art in the dialogue as well?
They don't discuss their ideas for the art, but you can see how it's all interconnected. And so when they're creating their art and they're having conflicts, because conflicts come up.
Right, because they have different ideas.
Right, we process it the same way that we work in dialogue. So we're constantly reinforcing these ideas, and as they develop in the dialogue, as they get to learn more as they get to understand each other more, that thickens the idea for the art. And so you see their art evolve over the 3 weeks, and it's pretty amazing how they take these ideas and incorporate them into the artwork. They can choose visual arts or filmmaking. So we have a film specialist. We have an
Who is Palestinian?
Nope. Erin is Canadian, actually. She's a professional cinematographer. She works with Yazan, who is Palestinian. And Yazan was actually a student in our first year in 2008. And he has come back. He's been with us since then. He went away for college to study filmmaking and has come back.
And then what other kinds of staff do you have?
So then we also have an art therapist who runs the art program, and she has an assistant also. We have 2 dialogue facilitators, 3 actually.
Whom you train, right? How long do you spend training them?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. Ashraf, I met 4 years ago.
Right.
4 years ago in Beit Jala, which is in the West Bank.
These guys travel to Israel and Palestine quite frequently.
So it's been wonderful. It's been so rewarding.
Because he knows.
Because we started out with him being somebody just who was excited about the ideas to somebody who's become so proficient at them. So he's been coming on for 4 years, and he's been part of the staff for 3. And it's exciting to watch him grow. Some of the other people I have trained over a couple of years. Some of the more recent people just this year. But the other piece is that many of the staff now were students. So they initially were in the program, and this past summer, one of them came up to me and he said, I really get it now. I get the ideas behind why this works. And that's so exciting to me.
Yeah.
And so they constitute Palestinians who live in Israel?
Palestinians who live in Palestine, Jewish Israelis, and Americans.
Who are working on the staff.
Right, and we take interns every year. So a lot of our staff are college students who are interning for the summer. Our administrator was an intern who just graduated from Gordon College, and our counselors come from all over.
And it's a living environment, right?
It's 24 hours a day. Yeah.
In Williamstown.
Yep, at Buxton School.
Which is pretty isolated. I came out, it wasn't easy to find in the woods there. And meanwhile, in Israel, the Jewish kids and the Palestinian Arab kids were, I would think, quite distressed. How could they focus?
This was a new experience for us because there was never an active conflict going on while we had the program. And so we had to think very carefully about how we were going to manage this. What we knew was that we couldn't not give them the news. And so we had, after breakfast every morning, we would all gather, and I, every morning, looked at about 7 different news sources, and our Arab-speaking staff looked at the Arabic sources, our Israeli staff looked at the Hebrew sources, and I took that and I gave them a news report that I said I was going to try to be as objective as possible. And one of the things we make clear is we all come with bias. We all are prejudiced in some way, but that I was going to try to give them the news as objectively as possible. And so they got the news every morning. I made a commitment to them that I would continue to give them the news. And it was painful. It was very hard for them to know that their families were at risk back home. But one of the things that we stressed is that there is nothing more important that they could be doing for their families and for their communities than what they were doing right here, right there. And I think that gave them some strength, knowing that being here, learning these skills, learning these new ideas, they were going to be able to go back and have an impact.
And not waste their time by worrying and not being present, and instead focusing on living their life to the fullest in the present.
And that doesn't mean they didn't worry. Of course they worried, but they were able to compartmentalize it.
And did they have cell phones? Could they check? No, so they were cut off in a good way.
Right. Yeah, that was a very good decision we made in the beginning before the summer started. No cell phones. They had computer time twice a week, so it's not that they were completely isolated. Yeah. Families could send emails as often as they wanted, and it came to my email, and then we would give them to the students. So it's not like they were completely isolated.
But it wasn't a total distraction.
Exactly.
All through the time.
Right, right, exactly.
Right. Let me tell you about another one of the art projects. I remember them so clearly. They took a piece of clay or something, I don't know, and they covered it with mirrors in the shape of a diamond. The top was flat and the reflective sides, but it came to a very sharp point. And that point was embedded in some kind of brown, squiggly stuff that represented humanity and had no faces, no identification, just they're the other, you know. And there were little pieces of colored glass stuck onto the diamond. And the diamond were the people of power and money who were thriving on this. And the little pieces of glass were the hangers-on who had decided, oh, there was something to be gotten out of identifying with them. And the people at the bottom were the innocent civilians and children on both sides who are getting hurt and used and ignored and harmed. And it was just stunning, especially when you looked at the diamond and you saw your own face.
Right. They were mirrors.
Because they were mirrors. Do you want to tell me a little bit about the insights that some of the kids had? What do you think happened to them in the course of these 3 weeks?
You know, I think so much happens to them in the 3 weeks that they don't even realize until they're able to process it. But one of the things that happens in the dialogue is that we talk about the individual. So there's an interviewer who asks questions out of curiosity, and the person that they're asking questions of gets to tell their story. And so for the first time, they're not hearing about us and them. We're breaking that down and getting to the core of each human being, each individual.
Right. So they're a person, not a symbol.
Exactly. And so each one tells their story about who they are and what touches them, what affects them, who their family is, what their community is. And people get to hear that instead of seeing them.
And the kid gets to hear it too, because they've probably never been able to have that much time.
Right. And they get to hear back from the reflectors, from the witnesses, how their words touched others. So that's a very powerful thing, to realize that you were actually heard. And one of the things that so often happens in conflict is nobody listens.
Right. Nobody. They're already preparing their own words. But these kids didn't have any words to prepare because they weren't supposed to come back.
Oh, they had words prepared. That was the frustrating thing for them, because they came expecting to argue. Oh. They came expecting to talk politics.
And stand up for their side.
Exactly. And there wasn't a place for that. And that's hugely frustrating. What happens is they come, and in their minds, in many of their minds, if you're arguing with each other, then you're accomplishing something.
And showing pride in your own side.
Exactly. But what they come to learn is that they're not accomplishing anything.
Right.
And so by listening to each other, they're actually accomplishing much more.
When I was in Williamstown, these girls and guys were hanging around each other's necks. They were tearful. They loved each other. I mean, you could just feel the intimacy. And I think when someone reveals their vulnerabilities that way, you can't help but love almost anybody. I mean, maybe if you got Hitler up there and he said, well, my father beat me and everything, you could even feel a little empathy. Who knows? But when somebody who has come, they come with a mission, right? They want to take part in a healing process, right?
Right. And you know, the thing is that nobody in that room was responsible for what's going on.
Right.
And I think that that's a clear distinction.
Right.
Is that, and one of the things we stress is that each one of the people in that room chose to come here. So they are each other's support system.
Right.
There isn't one person in that room that is solely responsible.
They're not responsible for what their elders do.
Right. Now, what we do talk about, though, is what is your responsibility as you move on? As you come to an understanding, what is your responsibility in your community?
Now, Debbie, what are your credentials for doing this?
Well, I'm an art therapist and a mental health counselor.
Oh, so there we've got the dialogue and the art, right, yeah.
Yeah. And Evan actually was my mentor and trained me in the Dialogic process that we use. And it's evolved.
And you
a little
invented it, didn't you?
Well, I wouldn't quite say that, but I certainly have been working on it. You know, I want to answer a question that you asked Debbie in a different way. Not what it was like for the kids and what changed in them, but how it changed me.
All right.
This has been a very hard summer for me because I wasn't part of that beautiful community. And that's a community of listening and caring and loving and empathy. They were there supporting each other, which is just a marvelous thing. I was here being bombarded by people in the community asking me questions about how could I be supporting Palestinians when they're so evil. And they create tunnels and they shoot rockets into Israel. And it's an extraordinarily dehumanizing question.
Right.
For me, the statement that I kept making all summer long to people was, these are real people, many of whom I know and love on both sides. And when you talk about them as them, instead of seeing them as humans who share in the pain with each other, we're doing such a disservice.
And smush them together as all perpetrators.
Right, as perpetrators, and looking at each other as adversaries, instead of looking the way Debbie brings people together to look at how the problem affects both, how this issue that has gone on for decades
Okay, so I want to ask you an important question. Who's funding this? Because it seems to me that not many Jewish people or organizations would feel they wanted to give money for Palestinians. So how are you funding this?
We are funded mostly by private donations, by people who understand what we're doing, who get it. Most of the people who are skeptical, once they've met the students, once they see what they're doing, they get it.
You can't help but love them.
Right. And the thing is, whatever people think about what's happening right now, the only chance of moving beyond it is to train the youth to do it differently.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. And then, no, there's not going to be a solution tomorrow. But this is the only possibility.
Only answer.
It's the only answer. You've got to help young people understand that there are other possibilities besides violent conflict.
Right.
And so...
And giving money to one side or the other only polarizes it.
Right. This isn't about politics.
No.
It is not about politics. We're dealing with young people who are struggling, who are traumatized, who are troubled with the life that they lead.
On both sides.
On both sides. And they deserve to live a better life.
How much money do you need? How much does this cost every summer?
We are a very bare budget. I don't get paid, but we need about $150,000 to $200,000 a year. And it's very difficult to raise money.
So if you feel like you want to help both sides. Let me just tell you one of the third designs. It's a building and 2 rooms with a wall between it. There's kids, there's old people, there's different age levels and groups, and they can't get together because the wall is in the middle, and one of them is throwing a piece of a ribbon across that says peace on it. But the interesting thing was, there's on the outside, there's a broken window that shows the sky. The kids explain this to me. The Arabs see, if they can break down the wall, they see freedom. And on the other side, on the Israeli side, it's chaos and blood. And they see that if the wall is broken down, everything will fall apart. And that kids from 2 different backgrounds could agree that this was an objective, as much as possible, picture of what the fears were. I just think you're doing wonderful stuff. Tell them what they'll be helping if they contributed to this.
If you contribute to Artsbridge, you're basically donating money directly to these students.
Really?
There's no overhead. These students need to continue the work. So we have seminars going on in the region. We go back 3 times during the year to continue the work, and they need that support. And without funding, we can't do that.
And people need to understand, it's not about helping one side or the other. It's about coming to a resolution of a long-standing problem.
Right.
And that this is the way, just a small way, but a beginning to resolving the problem.
Right.
And there are other groups like this too, that are being successful also. It's not impossible, since the vast majority of Israelis and Palestinians are victims of powers
Right.
that are kind of out of control.
Right. Everybody's a victim in this. You know, these teens are victims
Yeah.
on both sides. They are not perpetrators of
Right.
violence, and they need support. They deserve a better future.
Thank you, Debbie,
Thank you.
Nathan,
Thank you.
and Evan Longin for coming
Thank you
in.
so much.
Thank you for being a part of my life and letting me also get a little glimpse of this little heaven
Thank you.
that you have created for a short period of time, and let's hope it extends.
Shalom and salam.
You may ask, what can one do when the problems seem so huge? Start to learn, work my friends, keep your eyes on the prize to the end. Oh, we can do it.